So we are here with Teens on the Scene. I'm Andrew Meese.
And my name is Shasta Garcia.
Today we are setting the scene here in the lovely town of Volcano, California. Hopefully we are going to learn some of the history here and meet some of the various people that live here and make this town what it is.
Yeah, we hope that you enjoy following us around the town of Volcano and just hearing all the great stories that people have to offer and what this town has to offer. And let's just go ahead and get started.
Let's go.
This episode of Teens on the Scene is made possible in part by Volcano Union Inn, Volcano Press, U-Turn, St. George Hotel and Restaurant, Volcano Theater Company, and Volcano General Store.
We are here with Adam Godstein for Volcano Press. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the building here?
Be happy to. This is called the Old Sibley's Brewery. It was built in 1856. You even have a sign in case I ever forget that. That's right over the iron shutter there. And it was built really pretty much in the middle or towards the end of the gold rush. Rumor has it that there were 3 beer breweries in the town of Volcano back in the 1800s with lots of saloons, but in some cases the saloons were just a plank of wood over a couple of barrels outside, hardly even a building. And this building has been around since then and in pretty good shape, all things considered. It's built out of 2-foot thick stone walls, very stout and substantial, and it's been in our family since the 1960s. 1964 is when my mom and dad bought this place.
And what brought you here?
That's a good question. You know, our family originally were from San Francisco, and my folks were both working hard, you know, working class people in San Francisco. And they were looking for a place to go on the weekends in the summers. I have an older brother and a sister, and they wanted a place out of the city that we could come to and just sort of relax on the weekends. And they started coming up here actually before I was born, in the early 1950s. And they camped out just outside of town, or they stayed at the St. George Hotel. And then when my mom discovered this place for sale in 1964, she got pretty excited.
So how did Volcano Press get started?
Another good question. Originally, my mother was in the book publishing business in San Francisco with Glide Foundation. Glide was one of the many nonprofits that operated, or I should say Glide Publications was one of the many nonprofits that operated out of Cecil Williams Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco. And eventually she wanted to continue the publishing business but move out of San Francisco, so she literally bought the business, changed the name from Glide Publications to Volcano Press, and moved it up here to Volcano.
Exciting. How does it feel to be able to take that position on and to be able to just kind of live out that legacy?
It's been pretty interesting. I've worked for every member of my family. I've worked for my dad, who had the dry cleaning business in San Francisco for years and years. My brother was a building contractor, so I swung a hammer with him for a while. My sister was selling outdoor backpacking equipment and cross-country skis, and now I'm working for my mom. So it's funny. I've worked for every member of my family. I'm not sure I've ever had a real job. But these days I do call myself publisher of Volcano Press, and it is a feminist press. And as I mentioned to you, the emphasis are on books primarily on the subject of domestic violence, but not exclusively, as you know.
And we will go ahead and take a look inside and hear a little bit more about some of the history and just kind of take a little tour and hear more about Volcano Press and possibly even see the books that you're talking about.
You betcha.
All right,
I'm following you. So technically we were still outside here. As you can see, this is the outside of the rock wall, and this used to be the side yard, but over the years additions have been built onto the brewery, and it's this place. It's almost like the Winchester House, depending on what year you're talking about. Come here, Scott.
Just kept building onto it.
Kept building onto it, and my brother did most of it. My brother, whose name is Dan, is a phenomenal builder, designer, and everything that you see here is basically what he's done. Yeah. So as you go through this way, you're in this little entryway, such as it is, kind of a hallway. I'm just going to kick on a couple lights so that
we can see. Let there be light.
And you can see, for example, by the shoji screen, that my mom had a lot of Asian influences. She traveled a lot to Japan. She's also been to China and other places. And so when my brother was designing the interior of this place with my mom for the purposes of remodeling, she wanted to incorporate the shoji screens from Japan. So it's kind of an east meets west, because you've got this old building that was built over 150 years ago, but you've got some of these Japanese influences. And this is the nice old chimney for the fireplace that used to be in the kitchen, which we don't really use anymore. But we'll go over this way. And
it looks like you have a little bit of everything within this house.
Yeah, it's true. It is. Yeah, there are a lot of different influences. I'll give you an example. This floor right here that we're standing on, this is a recycled gymnasium floor from a gym in Berkeley. So this is all maple, and they were tearing down this old gym, and they were throwing this wood away. And our cousin called us and said, if you get down here right now, you can have all this wood for free. And so my brother and I jumped down there and got it and put the floor in. So this was the original back wall of the brewery. You can see the old iron shutters, and you can see how thick the walls are.
I know the structure must be amazing.
Yeah, it's a very stout building. I mean, it's really clearly not going anywhere. So we call this the big room. And I won't apologize for how sort of cluttered it looks and feels right now. It just is what it is. But you can picture this room when everything's all put away and boxes unpacked and so on and so forth. We've had a lot of nice family events here. We've had winter solstice parties. We've had anniversaries and birthdays and kids. When our daughter was very young, she took her first steps in this room as a 1-year-old or however old she was. And so and I should say the acoustics in here are also very good. I was telling you I play in this band called Over the Edge, and we recorded a live CD, and when we did, we put a black drape against the windows in the front of the big room, and we jammed 45 people in here and had a live concert, a house concert, and it was just awesome. I mean, the acoustics are just perfect in here.
How neat.
It seems like the kind of house where everything has a story behind it.
That's pretty astute of you to make that observation, and the answer is yes. A lot of this stuff my mother has collected in her travels over the years. You know, I mentioned to you earlier that her father, my grandfather, was one of the muralists at Coit Tower. His name is Bernard Zackheim, and he actually studied with Diego Rivera in Mexico in the late 1920s. These two paintings are of my mother here when she was a teenager, young teenager. So that's Ruth as a teenage girl, and that would be my sister Karen. And my grandfather Bernard Zackheim is one of the muralists at Coit Tower. And you're right. I mean, you can look around this room, and I can pretty much tell you stories that my mom has told me about where things have come from with her extensive travels.
I feel honored to be able to hear it, and I'm so excited that we get to share it with everybody else.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. It's almost like living in a museum. I told my wife when we moved in here last September, I said, it's almost like we're living in a medieval castle in some ways. It's not easy to heat, not easy to cool off either, but it's a really nice place to live.
All right, well, can you show us around a bit more?
Love to.
And you mentioned that you played music. I would love to hear you.
Yeah, thank you. This band, it's an interesting band. It's called Over the Edge. I play guitar and have written most of the original music. We feature electric violin by a guy that I met literally across the street at the Volcano Union Inn. His name is Dave Holub. I met him 13 years ago in 2002, and we've just been hard at it. We're a quartet these days, but we've been hard at it for 13 years, and we've been voted the best band in Amador County the last 3 years. And as you know, Dave and I just got finished playing the national anthem for the San Francisco Giants. Sorry, shameless plug. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had to say that.
It's okay. It's something to be proud of, and definitely cool. Something to celebrate.
It is. It is. And, as I said, I sort of wear two hats. I wear a publishing hat for Volcano Press, then I get to take that off and put on the music hat and so on. And my wife is a very good singer, so she sometimes joins the band, too.
Awesome.
So this is the addition here, and I'll give you an example. This horizontal piece of wood trim that it's kind of hard to see it with the window up there, but you see it right here. This is where the old ceiling was, and one of the nice design effects that my brother... Yeah, well, probably pretty standard, I think. If you walked into a room, that would sort of normally be where a ceiling would be. But my brother vaulted the ceiling, so in other words, it used to be at that elevation all the way around. And then he took the ceiling up when he remodeled, thereby exposing that much more of the rock wall here. So it was a nice effect to increase the size of the room, but also to expose more of the back wall of the brewery. So this addition has always been here. We used to, this door was not here originally. This used to be the bedroom, very tiny bedroom, very tiny bathroom right here. It was kind of a tiny kitchen. And then over the years, we sort of expanded out. My brother built the bedroom for my mom here. The kitchen's about the same, but you saw when we were walking in the dining room. In fact, let's go there now so you can get a sense. So again, the kitchen hasn't changed that much in all the what is it, 51 years now that we've been coming here. Yeah, that's a nice old stove from the 50s. It's called a chamber stove, and it took 4 very beefy guys to get that thing into this place, as you can imagine. But this used to be the back wall of the addition when my folks bought it, with just a small window there. And eventually my mom said, no, we need a dining room, so we came out here. My brother built this room, and we've had a lot of great family. Yeah, we're done.
Yeah, it's so intricate.
Isn't that cool?
I can see where you were talking about with all the different cultures and things, and you can really see it.
Yeah, in fact, that lamp or chandelier or light fixture came out of a home in San Francisco. A family was remodeling, and they didn't want this old-fashioned light in there any longer. So we said, yeah, we'll take it.
Add a little bit more history, add a little bit more stories, and you're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. This is another painting of my grandfather's. His name was Bernard Zackheim. And I've always loved this one. Being a musician myself, you can see with the cellos here, and I don't know that much about this self-standing screen, but I just love it. It's always really appealing.
I think it speaks for itself, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take a look where all the magic happens for Volcano Press.
You betcha. Right? I'm going to follow Shasta, because she knows how to get it.
Oh, totally. I'm super bad at directions, so I don't know if you should try. Okay, so we are here in your editorial room, editorial office.
Yeah, this is the nerve center for Volcano Press. Volcano Press, Mom published the very first book on the subject of domestic violence, as I mentioned, in 1976, but she was publishing before that. So these days, I say that Volcano Press is well over 40 years old. Oh, sorry about that.
Well over 40 years old.
And so all the publishing activities take place here. We farm out a lot of the services. If a book needs to be proofread or edited, we'll send that out to an editor, but everything is done online these days, so it's pretty darn easy. We could work with a book cover designer in New Hampshire, and we could work with an editor in Los Angeles, and a printer in Sacramento, and that's how publishing is done anymore.
It's almost just like emailing your mom back and forth.
Exactly.
Kind of reminds us of us teens and how we can be sitting right next to each other enjoying conversation, but really it's texting.
I don't want to make too much fun of you guys, because the truth of the matter is, I think it's great that you have the technology to communicate like that. Us old-timers like to sort of laugh at it a little bit and say, back in my day, we used to just go out and play, and that's how we communicated, that's how we talked. But no,
it's important to put the phone down once in a while. And most of the books that have been published are actually right over here, correct? Or some of them?
Yeah, some of them. We can go back and look at those, you bet.
What was the original book that was published?
Good question. So, this is an interesting story. My mom and dad were at an international book festival in Europe, and on their way back from Germany, they stopped off in London. And I believe there was another book function in London. This was 1975. And while they're at this book event, a book agent comes up to my mother at the booth and says, I'd like you to look at a manuscript. And he sort of slides this manuscript very sort of secretly, across the table. It turns out it was a book by someone who became a rather well-known author in the field of domestic violence. Her name was Erin Pizzey. She ended up passing away a few years back. But she wrote a book in England called Scream Quietly or the Neighbors Will Hear. Very heavy-duty subject matter. And for a number of reasons, my mom looked at this manuscript, but for a number of reasons she chose not to publish that book because it was so sort of UK-specific. But she comes back to the U.S. in '75, and she says to an author that she's already worked with, Del Martin, she said, Del, we need to write and publish a book on domestic violence, and she had already worked with Del on another subject matter. So Del wrote this book, Battered Wives. It came out for the first time in 1976, and it was the first book in the United States on the subject of domestic violence.
And where can people find these books?
Certainly on our website. I won't mind giving just the shameless pitch, and that would be volcanopress.com, of course, but you can go on Amazon and type in titles, books about domestic violence, and so on.
Well, me and Andrew would just like to thank you for supporting us and for sharing your story and for welcoming us
to your
here.
beautiful house.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
you so much.
it. All right.
It was nice meeting you.
Likewise, Shasta.